Here is what I thought was happening, and here is what was actually happening. And for the first 90 seconds of that Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, they looked identical from the inside and completely different from anywhere else. This is a story about two things at the same time. It is a story about getting it wrong, which I did, for about 90 seconds, with full confidence and all the correct reasoning. And it is a story about what was actually there once I stopped assuming and looked. Both of those are true simultaneously. Being wrong is not something to skip over in favor of the nicer ending, because the being wrong part is exactly where the lesson lives. What I thought was happening: a stranger was at my door in the dark, crying, asking to be let in because something had followed him. Classic setup for something bad. My brain, which had been trained by 34 years of movies and news and the general ambient anxiety of living alone on the third floor of an apartment building in a city, had already assembled a narrative before I finished opening the door, and the narrative was, this person is in danger, and bringing the danger with them, and the correct response is to close the door and call 911. What was actually happening? A delivery driver named Joel, 22 years old, 3 months into a job he'd taken to cover rent while he finished a degree, had been followed for 6 blocks by a large injured dog who had decided that Joel was the only available source of help and was declining to consider alternatives. Start with the dog, because the dog is the whole story. 70 pounds, German Shepherd mix, brindle coloring that made her look dark in the streetlight and darker on a stairwell. Gash on her right rear leg that had been bleeding long enough to begin drying at the edges, which meant it had been happening for a while, which meant she had been injured and moving for some time before Joel found her, or she found him. She had picked him up outside a restaurant on his third stop of the evening, pressed against his left leg the way animals press when they are in pain, and have decided that the nearest available warm body is their best current option. He had tried to leave her twice. Once at the restaurant corner, where he had tried to walk quickly and she had kept pace. Once 3 blocks later, where he had stopped and said, "Go on, go home," in the reasonable tone of a person addressing a dog he expected to understand English, and she had sat down and looked at him with the expression of an animal who has heard the instruction and is declining to comply. By the time he knocked on my door, she had been with him for 6 blocks through a November night, and he was not frightened of her. He was frightened for her, which is a completely different thing that looked identical from the outside. "Let me in, please. It followed me," was the least adequate description of a situation I have encountered in 34 years of being a person in the world. Subscribe here, because what happened over the next 4 hours in my apartment on a Tuesday night is one of the more unexpected evenings I have spent, and it ends in a place I did not see coming when a crying man knocked on my door at 11. Subscribe and stay. My name is Dale. 34 years old, data analyst, 3rd floor of a building in a mid-sized Ohio city where I had lived for 2 years and where I knew exactly 4 people. My neighbor across the hall, who I nodded to, the woman downstairs who played piano badly but enthusiastically on Sunday mornings, whom I knew by sound, a colleague I occasionally grabbed lunch with, and the guy at the corner coffee shop who had my order memorized. I had lived alone since my last roommate moved out 18 months prior, and in that time I had developed the particular equilibrium of a person who has come to understand and accommodate their own solitude. Late nights, food delivered to the door, a preference for plans I had made myself and situations I could see coming. My risk assessment instincts were, as a result, somewhat calibrated for a quieter range of inputs than a crying stranger at 11 on a Tuesday. This is relevant because what happened when I opened the door was first processed by those instincts, which arrived at one answer, and then by my actual eyes, which arrived at a different one. I had opened the door because the knock was urgent in a specific way. Not aggressive, not the knock of someone who expected to be let in, but the knock of someone who desperately needed something and had no other door available. I know that sounds like a lot to read into a knock, but you spend 18 months alone, and you learn to read knocks. This one said, "I am out of options." Joel was on the landing. He was a lean kid in a delivery jacket, a thermal bag on his shoulder, his eyes wide and wet in the way of someone who has been holding something together and has just run out of holding. Behind him, at the top of the stairs, was the dog. She was enormous. She was also, very clearly, hurt. Her rear right leg carried wrong, her movement up the stairs slow and deliberate in the way of something working around pain. She had a collar, no tag. She was looking at me with the specific expression that large injured dogs have, which is an expression that combines "I need help" with "I am prepared to wait, and I have identified you as the one who can provide it." Joel said, "She won't leave me. She needs help. I don't know who she is. I can't take her home. I have a cat. Can she just, please?" Not "it followed me" in the sense I had expected. Followed me in the sense of attached to me, and now I am standing on a stranger's landing with a hurt dog, and I have no more deliveries tonight and nowhere else to go. I said, "Is she aggressive?" He said, "She's been leaning on my legs for 6 blocks. I opened the door wider. Here is what the next 20 minutes looked like, which was nothing like the previous 20 minutes had looked like. Joel's full name was Joel Fairfax. He told me this while we were both crouched on my kitchen floor with the dog between us, assessing the leg, which was worse up close than it had looked on the landing. A gash, not deep enough for emergency surgery, I didn't think, but absolutely in need of cleaning and possibly stitching. She was patient. She lay on her side on my kitchen floor, with the resigned grace of an animal who has been through enough that one more indignity is manageable. I had called animal control. I was on hold for 11 minutes, which in the context of the situation felt longer than 11 minutes, and in the context of my life, was not the most interesting 11 minutes I had spent. While I was on hold, Joel was on the kitchen floor with the dog, talking to her in a low, continuous voice. Not to me, to her, the specific register that some people use with animals, which sounds faintly ridiculous to anyone listening, and which the dog was receiving with the focused attention of someone hearing important information. She had her head on his knee. He was not making a big deal of this. I watched them while I was on hold and thought, this is an extremely normal thing for a person who genuinely cannot leave a hurt animal to be doing, and an extremely unusual thing for a person with malicious intentions to be doing on a stranger's kitchen floor. Animal control gave me instructions. Keep her calm, keep her warm, gentle pressure on any active bleeding. There was no active bleeding. She was calm, she was warm. She was on a 22-year-old delivery driver's knee in my kitchen at 11:15 on a Tuesday night, and she appeared, all things considered, more at ease than either of the humans in the room. I hung up and looked at Joel. He said, "Thank you." Eyes on the dog, not on me. This told me everything about the direction the gratitude was flowing. I found out about Joel over the next 90 minutes, while we waited for animal control. He was 22, studying environmental science, working the delivery shift 4 nights a week because the shift paid more than the daytime, and he had a gap in his grant funding for the semester. He lived 2 neighborhoods over. He had a cat named after a minor character in a novel he'd read in high school, and loved past the point of social acceptability. He had found the dog outside the restaurant on his 3rd stop, and she had followed him, and when he realized she was hurt and limping, he had tried to flag down a passing car, tried to get a pedestrian to help, tried to find anyone who would take responsibility for this animal, and no one had. He was the last option available. He had looked up the nearest delivery stop on his route, which was my address, and he had come to my door because there was a human behind it, and that was what was available. I couldn't just leave her, he said. It was not a complicated statement. It contained everything about who Joel was, delivered without any apparent awareness that it was revealing. The animal control officer arrived 83 minutes after I called, not the 90 they had promised, which I noted. Her name was Simone, and she was the specific kind of efficient that comes from doing a job for a long time and having developed the ability to assess a situation very quickly without making anyone feel assessed. She looked at the dog, looked at the leg, asked 3 questions, and said the gash needed stitching but was not an emergency surgery situation. She scanned for a chip. The scanner beeped. She looked at the display. She said, "There's a chip." Joel and I both looked at each other. Maple looked at Simone with the same patient attention she had given everyone all evening. Simone made a call. She spoke to someone for about 4 minutes while Joel and I sat on my kitchen floor on either side of the dog, who had not moved since she'd lain down and who had established herself in my kitchen with the permanence of someone who had decided this was where she was going to be for a while and was comfortable with it. Simone came back and said, "Registered to a family in Cleveland. Dog went missing 7 months ago. They filed a report." She showed us the phone screen, a lost dog listing, A photo. A German Shepherd mix with one ear slightly higher than the other. The specific distinctive asymmetry that I could see, looking from the photo to the dog on my floor, was the same animal. They've been updated that she's been found. Someone will be coming to get her. Someone was coming from Cleveland at 11:30 on a Tuesday night in November. Simone treated the leg efficiently and without drama, the way a person treats a wound when they have done this many times and have decided the animal in front of them is manageable and the situation is not an emergency. She accepted it with the exhausted patience of an animal that has been through enough that one more uncomfortable thing is just an additional data point. She did not move away from Joel's hand while Simone worked. Simone said the gash was consistent with a fencing injury. The pattern of it, the angle. Probably she had pushed through or under a gap in something at some point during the 7 months and had caught the leg. She said the dog was underweight but not severely, which meant she had been finding food somewhere, which in turn meant she had been surviving rather than merely existing. She said 7 months loose in a city, and still this functional was not nothing. She said it with the specific matter-of-fact respect of a person who had seen animals come in worse. Then she scanned for the chip. She did it without announcing she was doing it. Just produced the scanner and ran it along the dog's back the way you run a scanner along a dog's back. Routine, procedural, the thing you do. Quiet beep. Simone looked at the display. She looked at it for a beat longer than a negative read would require. She said, "There's a chip." Joel and I both looked at her, then at each other, then at the dog, who was looking at Simone with the patient attention she had been giving everyone all evening, as if she had known about the chip the whole time, and had been waiting for someone to think to check. The call took 4 minutes. We listened to one side of it. When Simone came back, she turned her phone toward us. A lost dog listing, active, a photo of a German Shepherd mix with one ear slightly higher than the other. The distinctive asymmetry that I could see, looking from the photo to the animal on my kitchen floor, was the same animal. Same ear, same face. Cleveland. Cleveland. Maple. That was her name. It was in the listing. Had gone missing in April. They had filed a report the same week. They had never closed the listing. 7 months. 2 cities. 6 blocks and a delivery driver who couldn't leave her. Simone left at 12:45 with a card and a report number. She said the family would be in touch directly with me, since this was the address where Maple had been found. Joel and I sat on the kitchen floor with Maple between us. She was asleep. She had arrived in my apartment 2 hours ago as a frightened, injured animal who had been on the move for 7 months, and she was now deeply, completely asleep on linoleum between 2 people she had known for less than 3 hours, which told you something about what it felt like to finally be somewhere safe, after a long time of not being somewhere safe. Joel said he should probably go. He had the cat. His cat did not know where he was. I said I understood about the cat. He did not go for another hour. We ordered food from a different service than the one he worked for, and neither of us addressed the slight irony of this. And we sat in the kitchen while Maple slept, and we talked with the specific ease of 2 people who had been through something together that neither of them had planned, and that had bonded them in the sideways way that unplanned things bond people. Not a dramatic connection. Not the kind where you make declarations. Just, we had been on the kitchen floor together with an injured dog while the clock moved toward 2 in the morning, and now we were eating noodles and talking. He told me about the degree, environmental science, 2 semesters left, grant gap that had required the delivery shifts, about the cat, whose name was a reference to a minor character in a novel he had read at 17, and loved past the point of reasonable return, and whose name he was slightly self-conscious about telling me, and told me anyway. About his neighborhood, about his plans, about the specific uncertainty of being 22, and knowing what you want but not yet having the shape of it. I told him about the 18 months alone, about the data analysis job, which was good work and not always interesting work, which I had made peace with. About the low threshold for drama, which this Tuesday had done something significant to. We were sitting in my kitchen and there was a sleeping dog between us, and neither of us had planned any of this, and it was, genuinely, one of the better Tuesday nights I had spent in the 2 years I had lived in that apartment. At 1:40 in the morning, a minivan with a Cleveland registration pulled up to the curb outside my building. I was at the 3rd floor window. I watched it park. a dark blue Honda Odyssey, the kind of family vehicle that says, "There are children in this house who have a dog," or had one. A woman got out first, moving fast, the way people move when they have been in a car for 2 hours on a night they were not expecting to have, and have arrived at something that mattered. Then a man. Then, from the side door, a girl who looked about 10 years old, who had clearly been asleep in the back seat. Her hair had the specific flattened quality of a child woken from a backseat sleep, and who had been woken for this and was not complaining about being woken, not in the least, because she was already running toward the building entrance before her parents had closed the car doors. I went to the hallway. Joel was already there with Maple on the lead. Simone had left, standing outside the elevator. Maple was tired and her leg was treated and she was moving carefully, still the deliberate, careful movement of an animal working around discomfort. She had been alert when the family texted they were close. Not excited, alert. Ears forward, head up, the specific posture of a dog who has received information she is processing. The elevator opened. The girl came out at a run. What happened in Maple's body in that moment is not something I have the language for. Not precisely. I can tell you what it looked like, a reorganization. Like something that had been held in a particular configuration for a very long time released all at once. She made a sound I had not heard in 2 hours, a sound that was not a bark and not a whine, and that I can only describe as the vocal equivalent of the thing her body was doing, which was trying to close the distance between herself and this child, regardless of what her leg was currently capable of. She lunged forward. Her legs slowed her, and the girl dropped to her knees on the hallway floor, and Maple reached her, and the girl had both arms around her, and neither of them was letting go. Joel and I stood next to each other in the hallway. He was looking at the floor in the specific way of a person managing their face. I was not managing mine particularly well. I am a data analyst. Numbers, logic, careful management of information, not sentimental by reputation or self-description. 1:40 in the morning on a Wednesday, in a hallway that smelled like the building's industrial cleaner, I was not prepared. I will not pretend I was prepared. Joel left at 2 o'clock. He had work the next day, not the delivery shift, an early class, and the cat had been alone long enough. We exchanged numbers in the hallway while the elevator came, neither of us making it a bigger deal than it was, which is to say we exchanged numbers the way you exchange numbers with someone you have been through something with and expect to see again. We have had coffee twice since then, at a place between our neighborhoods. We have not talked very much about Maple or the night she arrived, not because it's uncomfortable, but because it occupies the category of things that don't need to be discussed to be understood. It happened. We were both there. We know. The second time we had coffee, he told me the cat's name. Finally. It is from a novel I have not read. I have since started reading it. This character appears for about 4 pages in the middle, and is, as far as I can tell, not particularly notable, which made the naming feel like an act of devotion I respected. He is finishing the degree in the spring. He is not sure what comes after. He is 22, and doing what 22 looks like when you are doing it with intention, and some anxiety, and occasional uncertainty, which is more or less what 22 is supposed to look like. Here is the thing, and I'll say it as plainly as I can. When someone knocks at 11 at night, crying, saying something followed me, your brain assembles a narrative. It assembles it fast, and it assembles it with confidence, and it is not wrong for doing so. Caution in that situation is the correct response. Look before you open all the way. Take the beat to assess what's actually there. That instinct is not the enemy. The enemy is staying inside the narrative once you have more information. What I had, after 90 seconds of actually looking, a 22-year-old in a delivery jacket who was frightened for an animal, not of one. A dog who had been walking on a bad leg for hours, and had made a decision about who to trust. A Tuesday night that had turned into something I had not expected and that required something from me that I had not planned to give. I gave it. Not heroically. I made a phone call and sat on a floor and ordered noodles and waited. But I gave it, and what came of it was a chip scan, and a family from Cleveland, and a hallway at 1:40 in the morning, and a 10-year-old girl whose dog had been gone for 7 months. Sometimes, the terrified person is terrified for something, not of something. Sometimes it followed me means I found something that needed me, and I didn't know what to do. Sometimes the right move is to open the door wider. Not always. Read what's there first, but then, read what's actually there. Joel didn't have to keep walking with her. He had stops to complete. He could have called animal control himself from the sidewalk and left her there. He could have done the thing that would have been entirely reasonable, the thing that kept his evening on schedule and his problem count low. He couldn't leave her. That's the thing he said that night, and it's the thing I keep coming back to. And I think it's worth saying plainly, in a world that gives a lot of credit to the people who act dramatically, and very little to the people who simply cannot bring themselves to walk away from something hurt. He couldn't leave her. He knocked on a door. Someone opened it. That's the whole story. Subscribe if it's yours too. And tell me in the comments about a time what you thought was one thing turned out to be something completely different once you opened the door all the way. Those are the stories worth sharing. Her name, we found out that night, was Maple. She had been lost in April. She came home in November. 7 months, 6 blocks, 1 delivery driver who couldn't leave her, 1 stranger who opened the door. Maple. She got home. That's 3 words and the whole thing. Subscribe if this one found you. Tell me in the comments about a time something turned out to be completely different from what you assumed before you looked properly. I want those stories. They're the ones that stay with me. Maple got home. That's the part that matters. Maple got home.